Welcome to the National Pulse, the official podcast of the Fitness Industry Council of Canada. I'm your host, Zach Weston, and we are the collective voice of over 7,000 facilities and 7 million members from coast to coast to coast. From the steps of Parliament Hill in Ottawa to the floor of your local gym, we are here to discuss the policy, the people, and the passion driving our industry forward. We're talking to the innovators, the disruptors, and the leaders who are evolving the Canadian fitness business landscape with the goal to support, promote, and protect our industry while we move to make Canada the fittest nation on earth. Today's guest is a true triple threat in the world of human performance and longevity. Dr. Mark Tarnopolsky is a man who doesn't just study the science of peak performance, he lives it. He is a professor of pediatrics and medicine at McMaster University, where he holds a division head position in neuromuscular and neurometabolic disorders. With over 500 peer-reviewed publications and a career spanning decades, he is one of the most cited researchers in the world regarding muscle metabolism and mitochondrial health. But Mark isn't just behind a microscope. He is a world-class athlete with a resume including podium finishes in trail running, ski orienteering, adventure racing, and ultra-endurance events, and had a VO2 max over 86 milliliters per kilogram per minute in his late 20s. Tremendously impressive. He is still winning Masters adventure races and has run over 100,000 kilometers in the past 40 years. It's this unique combination of clinical expertise and elite athletic experience that led him to found Stay Above Nutrition. His work centers on mitocentric approach, the groundbreaking idea that our mitochondria aren't just energy factories. They're the master regulators of how we age, how we recover, and how we fight off disease. Whether you are an elite athlete looking for that 1% edge or someone looking to maintain independence and strength well into your 90s, Mark's research on exerkines, multi-ingredient supplements, and cellular synergy is changing the map of human health span. Please welcome the man who is literally helping the world stay above the threshold of aging, associated disabilities, Dr. Mark Tarnopolsky.
Well, thank you very much, Zach, for the kind introduction. A little overwhelming to hear all of those things, but I really appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. And, you're an expert on muscle wasting and really how to stop it. So we're going to dive in and talk about fitness and muscle preservation and, the scientific term, trying to avoid sarcopenia. So, if we think for a moment about the 90-year-old athlete, you've conducted studies showing that 90-year-olds can gain significant muscle. What's the biggest myth people believe about aging and the inevitability of getting weaker, and other data that suggests that we lose 3 to 5% of muscle mass per decade after the age of 30?
Yeah, I think some of those numbers are accurate, and those statements really are correct. I think the myth really is that it's inevitable, and there's absolutely nothing we can do. We've published data with one of my PhD students where we looked at masters athletes compared to sedentary individuals. So we had people in their 20s, people in their 40s, and people over the age of 65. And we looked at those who were sedentary versus those that had trained for at least 10 years, the so-called masters athletes. What was clear is that both leg strength and VO2 max for the masters athletes over the age of 65 is actually better than the sedentary people in their 20s. But inevitably, as I've experienced myself, I think my VO2 was high before, but I've tested it over the decades. It clearly is coming down. But still now in the mid 60s is quite high compared to most people even in their 20s, and that's very true. So I think that clearly that there's absolutely nothing we can do about aging is the biggest myth. What's interesting too, and I think another myth is that once you're there, there's no going back. And you mentioned one of our studies where we had an individual who was 92, and he really had done almost nothing his whole life. And we put him into an exercise training program for 3 months. And at the end of that, he showed substantial increases in muscle mass and, more importantly, function. Mass and function usually correlate, but we showed that both of those things were going up in this individual. There's a body of literature that says once you're over 80 or 85, it's too late. There's nothing you can do. But it's pretty clear we've had at least 8 or 9 people over the age of 85 in our studies who do show improvements. What's interesting is that they tend to be more dependent upon optimized nutrition. And work by Stu Phillips, one of my good friends and colleagues, and one of my first
Hmm.
postdocs, has clearly shown that as we get older, we do need more protein because we become resistant to protein. And that is,
Mm.
for younger, the amount of protein we eat, much of it gets incorporated into muscle. But as we get older, it's a little harder for the protein that we eat to go into muscle. So we do need a higher protein intake to drive that post-exercise protein synthesis.
Interesting. So, we'll get into some of this in a little greater depth. And, I introduced, the company Stay Above Nutrition, which, I'm, a big fan of, given the clinical science that has gone into the ingredients and the formulas that you've created. And you've got it kind of behind you, your flagship product, Muscle 5. You were just talking about, that protein resistance. So,
Right.
Muscle 5 contains 40 grams of protein, and I'm curious, why that specific amount? Because we previously were, told about this 20 grams per meal rule. Is that now outdated? And are there certain age groups, as you've described, who really do need more?
Yeah, I think certainly people can get enough protein with optimization of their diet, but for many people it's a convenience issue and also a cost. On one hand, people say, well, you have to pay for protein powder, but you've got to pay for milk, which is becoming increasingly more expensive. So milk and eggs really are the highest
Hmm.
biological value protein. From an evolutionary perspective, we split from birds and reptiles 220 million years ago. They chose eggs and egg white to really to get the protein for their young. We chose milk, and those really have the highest biological value. But other things like lean meats and fish and others do have good quality protein, and you can even get reasonable amounts of protein with various combinations of vegetarian diet. It does require a lot more nuanced approach, and you have to have usually some support from a dietitian when you don't have those higher qualities to get enough. So there's a whole number of things that go into protein requirements, but it's pretty clear that one thing is true. Older adults do need more protein in terms of grams per kilogram. 0.8 is fine for sedentary people when you're younger, probably in the order of 1.2 grams per kilo as you get older of mixed protein. Could be a little bit lower if you have mainly, higher quality protein for sure. The other thing that Stu Phillips and others have shown is that many people don't get enough protein with breakfast and with lunch, and then they have this big bolus with
Mm.
dinner. And those pulses of increasing protein synthesis do make sense. So one of the rationales behind Muscle 5 was twofold. Number one, at 40 grams, taking a half a scoop with breakfast, a half a scoop with lunch gives you that protein stimulus in breakfast and lunch when many people are not consuming quite enough. And then most people get enough with their dinner because most people have a meat product usually with dinner. So that
Mhm.
was kind of the rationale behind it, half a scoop breakfast and lunch. For some people, you can still incorporate the full 40 grams. It might be a little bit much for an older adult, a female in particular. Sometimes they find the 40s too much, so taking 20 twice a day makes sense. Another thing that we did is I'm a big fan, as you can probably tell, of the evolution. So as mammals, we chose milk to grow our babies. So Mother Nature was smart. Mother Nature also chose a whey casein ratio that's very different for humans than it is for cows. Cows have 80% casein, 20% whey. Human breast milk, on average, is about 60% whey, 40% casein.
Mm.
So what we did is Stu Phillips and Johnny Parisi, one of my postdocs and students, came up with the
Mhm.
first Muscle 5 ingredients, tested it completely independent of our company in 2017. We purchased the patent and then using my interest and expertise, just tweaked it a little bit and came up with this humanized milk ratio. So we dropped the protein down to 40, but increased the quality. The whey comes in quickly and turns on our protein synthesis. Casein comes into our body a little more slowly and decreases protein degradation. So somehow Mother Nature knew that that was the perfect combination. After completing our research, the first study that we did with the Muscle 5 in older adults, we showed that people were eating less. They were consuming fewer calories versus when they consume collagen. And a paper came out showing that that humanized milk ratio actually optimizes what's called GLP-1 and GIP, which, as you know, are the two proteins which are being mimicked by the Novo Nordisk product Ozempic and also by
Mhm.
the product for people to have satiety so they don't eat as much. That's how Ozempic works. It tells your brain
Mhm.
to stop eating because, hey, we got enough protein. Let's just tone it down a bit. And so there is a sort of a mimicking of that process, albeit not for the long duration we get with Ozempic, but you get a greater
Mhm.
pulse after you eat with that ratio. So that's kind of the thought behind it. You also are probably aware that I've published many papers in older adults and younger individuals showing the benefits of creatine monohydrate. Based on our work, Stu and Johnny put that in the first formulation. Of course, we've carried that through because I really think that creatine is a critical factor which helps older adults and younger people optimize not just their performance, but also muscle mass and even bone health. We've shown in multiple studies
Mm.
is favorably influenced by optimal protein and optimal creatine.
So great to hear that, and that's one of the key ingredients within Muscle Five is that creatine, and I think we often see creatine as a bodybuilder supplement, and it's great to hear the importance of creatine for the aging population. In recent years, we've also started to hear and see some evidence that there's some support for cognitive benefits as well. Um, in addition to talking about the cognitive health impact for creatine, can you describe what's the ideal dose? Years ago people would take a loading phase, and does this still hold true? Do we still need to do that for varying ages and genders?
Yeah, the original studies in 1992 that came out from my good friend Roger Harris used a 20-gram loading dose. So in 3 to 4 days, they showed that you can increase muscle around 20% by doing the loading dose. In 1996, Eric Hultman and a famous physiologist, Paul Greenhalgh, another colleague, showed that by taking 3 grams, which really is just one level teaspoon every day for 30 days, you get the same loading as you got with the high dose loading.
Hmm.
So the rationale there, which we've taken in our patients and our studies with younger and older adults, is just to use a steady dose. Because there's very few people that say, oh, I've got a sporting event. I forgot to take my creatine. If that's the case, yeah, take 20 grams if you need to load in 4 or 5 days. But I think the problem there is with the higher doses, more likely to get tummy upset with those individuals. Hard to scarf down 20 grams of creatine if you've ever tried it. Whereas 3 grams to 5 grams, quite easy to take that on a daily basis. What we've shown with older adults is 5 grams loaded muscle, and the muscle stayed loaded for 4 months in our first study, 6 months in our second study. As I
Hmm.
mentioned, 3 grams was sufficient for younger individuals. Work by a colleague of mine, Dr. Serge Ostiuk, has shown that 4 grams also loaded brain and muscle equally when they took this
Hmm.
for 6 months. Now, part of the controversy now, and all the bloggers and people that don't understand the science say, oh, you need to take 20 grams. Part of it's marketing, so people sell more stuff, and part of it is just
Mhm.
people that don't know the science. So, yes, like muscle, if you need to load brain quickly, and in the acute brain loading studies, 20 grams is probably sufficient, as it is in muscle to load brain. But Serge has clearly shown that, as we do with all of our muscle studies in older adults, muscular dystrophy patients, and young people, you're not looking for a short-term load. You're looking for maintenance, especially for an older adult. You're going to be taking it for the rest of your
Mhm.
life for the benefits that are there. And those benefits, at least as far as we can show, are maintained for 4 and 6 months in our two studies. And there's no reason to believe why it would not be maintained indefinitely at that level. Now, cognitive, yeah, there's definitely evidence that there's protection in the brain. Early studies showed, brain trauma in preclinical models, so head injury, and so people started
Mhm.
at, in sporting events, football and others, where soccer, where there could be head injury, not just to get the
Mhm.
benefits from the muscle, but also potentially to protect the brain. We've shown in Lou Gehrig's disease mouse model that it gets into spinal cord and brain and protects nerves and brain.
Wow.
Know that
Hmm.
from age 35 to age 70, we lose about 30% of the nerves in our spinal cord, which go down to our muscle, which contributes to the sarcopenia of aging. And
Hmm.
in our mouse model of an accelerated loss of those nerves, we could show protection. So I think there's many reasons why over a long period of time people should be consuming creatine, but anything more than 5 grams for the average individual, both aging and athlete, I think you're wasting your money and you're just peeing the stuff out or
Hmm.
risking tummy upset.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We're also seeing some evolution in terms of the format that you can purchase, creatine. So we're now starting to see, options to consume creatine in gummies and in liquids. And, is this a good option? And what are the pros and cons?
Yeah, so the challenge is, and I'll just show here, and again, you can tell that I'm not trying to shove anything down people's throats. I'm showing another brand, but this is a good quality brand available in Canada. This is pure creatine monohydrate, and there's many sources available. Creatine is a white powder. The best creatine in the world, at least the most reputable company, is this. It's called CreaPure from Germany. Most of the really top companies will put this in. The problem is it's almost twice as expensive as stuff coming from China.
Hmm.
So if you see CreaPure, you know it's good quality creatine from what's called good manufacturing plant in Germany. So it's a white powder. As I say, one level teaspoon is 3 grams. A heaping teaspoon is closer to 5, which is, I think what most people need. The challenge is it doesn't dissolve. So I have here a prop. This is creatine. So that's creatine in water. So it does not dissolve. So it's very insoluble in water. And so what will happen if we leave this for a while, this is suspended. So it is not dissolved. It's suspended in a suspension right now. And most people will just shake it up and drink it. If you don't shake well, some will stay on the bottom. So that's the issue. And this is sitting around for a while. You can see how it's settled on the bottom. So if you leave that that I just shook up for 20 minutes, you'll see it'll settle to the bottom. Now, this is fraud. This is a company selling extremely expensive creatine, 3 times more expensive than CreaPure, which is the best creatine. This is supposed to be dissolved. So they're saying that this is dissolved. Now, one, the whole concept is totally flawed because you can't dissolve creatine unless you have a tiny amount in a huge amount of water. Number two, they even say that it is a liposome. So they put some fats and other things in. And what a liposome does really is it just takes the creatine in the middle and it wraps it with a little lipid bubble. But even then, a liposome can never dissolve. It goes into suspension. This is supposedly dissolvable creatine, but you can clearly see the white creatine on the bottom. So what I did with this is this so-called dissolvable is, you can see it's like a creamy white liquid. That's a suspension, and they may form liposomes. I doubt it, because if they did, why is the creatine precipitating on the bottom in 20 minutes? The other challenge with liquid creatine is that if you take creatine and just put it in water at room temperature, it will convert to creatinine. Creatinine is not what we want. We have tons of creatinine in our body. Creatine is converted to creatinine in all of our bodies, comes out in our blood, and we pee it out in our urine, and it's a convenient marker of kidney function. So anything sitting around in water at room temperature is just going to continually drop in terms of creatine and increase creatinine. So be very careful. There are some ways that you can put it into water, which we're working on, but it's very complex. And certainly these dissolvable forms that people are talking about is complete garbage. I've been in this area now for 30 years almost, and I've seen so many products come and go where they even have patents where they say that it's dissolvable. Creatine ascorbate, they said it was dissolvable. I've shaken that up for 10 years and it just keeps precipitating to the bottom. I won't show you the company, but here's another one that's supposed to be in solution. I don't know if you can see at the
Oh,
bottom.
wow.
This is now 12 years old. I shake it every year and it just keeps settling back down to the bottom. So anyhow, that's number one. Avoid the liquids. Stick to the powder, mix it into food, applesauce, yogurt, shake it up and drink it. That's the best way to do it. The other thing you can do, which several folks have done, and this is actually the CreaPure company called Allschem. We did a study with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. This was published in 2003. And they sent us the creatine in these crunchy tablets. So this is a little bit of sugar punched together, and it's a nice crunchy tablet, just like a candy. Boys with Duchenne dystrophy loved it. When the study was over, we couldn't get this in Canada, so all they had was the powder, and most of our kids hated the powder. So we started importing this, called Creatine 1, but Health Canada said that we couldn't bring it over from Germany, so we've spent a lot of food chemistry and money trying to make it here in Canada at a good manufacturing plant. So it is now available. And that is pure creatine. As you can see, it's dry. It's not in a water solution. It's it's not converting. And the creatine, in an unopened package is going to stay stable as long as you don't put water on it for, a couple of years. It's very, very stable in that form. The other form that people are selling, which is all the rage right now, which is complete healthcare fraud in many cases, are gummies. So I'll just show you here. So this is sold in Canada, if you can believe it, under an NPN number. What that means is the Natural Health Products Directorate number, which is a subgroup of Health Canada, is supposed to convey pharma-like properties, saying that what is on the label is in the gummy. Now, this is apparently got an NPN, well, it does have an NPN number, so you're supposed to believe that this contains what it says. So this thing weighs 2.5 grams. All right, that's 2.5 grams of creatine here. This gummy is 2.5, and it's supposed to have 2.5 grams of creatine inside it. So 2.5 grams of creatine, I don't know if you can see here, looks like this. So that big pile of powder, which is, essentially a teaspoon, is 2.5. Do anyone in the world think you can take that and put it into this clear gummy? The other issue too is a gummy has water. I used to be a co-founder of a gummy company. There's water, there's gelatin or pectin, polyalcohol sugars. So there's a tiny amount left for the creatine. You can't put 2.5 grams of creatine into a 2.5 gram gummy. It defies the laws of conservation of mass. And yet this criminal enterprise is being sold, and I won't show you the label so I don't get sued, but this is being sold in Canada under an NPN for far more cost than you would for just buying good old creatine monohydrate. And this is pure sugar. There's no way there's anything in it. It's crystal clear. And as I said before, creatine does not dissolve. You could maybe get a couple of milligrams into this, and they're saying there's 2,500 milligrams. It's a crystal clear.
Wow.
That's a pure sugar. So somebody is selling this, which cost them 3 cents to make this thing of gummy bears, and they're selling it for almost $40. Unbelievable. And you should see like the stuff on the website is crazy. Oh, I can feel that my sleep is better, my strength is better. The power of the placebo. And we should not be subject to this in Canada. We spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands on our products, millions to develop them, and then tens of thousands to continually test to make sure that we are within the what we say on the label, within the guidelines. And unfortunately, that's not the case.
Remarkable. Well, it felt to a certain degree like I was back in my biochemistry, class with Dr. Michael Houston back at the University of Waterloo many years ago. But I think this is really important to highlight that while creatine is such an important component and supplement that's highly studied with all kinds of benefits, the mechanism in terms of how you consume it is really important. And for those watching, the powder format certainly can be mixed into water and consumed quickly with good effect. But the options that now exist with regards to chewable tablets is very effective and maintains the integrity of creatine. And I'll disclose, I've tried them. And honestly, I think that the chewable tablets are a fantastic option in comparison to mixing the powders in water. So fantastic that we have these companies that are now creating these options that, kids who can really benefit from them are actually enjoying them and taking them. But you raise a really important point about the placebo impact. And there's so many studies that show that placebo can impact, as much as a 30% believed response in terms of a benefit in all kinds of different areas. Stay tuned to the Fitness Industry Council of Canada podcast for the next edition of this interview with Dr. Mark Tarnopolsky.